You ever, when you're taking a dump, twist your pubes into dreads? Not being a barbarian, I trim, and so no. But if I've been lazy for long enough, and I can, I do, and that's usually my sign that I need to trim again. That topic was suggested by a friend, based on the impression he got of what I like to talk about on this podcast after listening to the first episode. Spot on, man. Thanks. But that does make me think about what I am doing. And I talked about this in the first episode, and somehow, in the short amount of time since then, I'm already second guessing. Because I'm just sitting here talking to myself. Eventually, I have to run out of things to say, right? All the smart boys are doing podcasts where they bring on some guest who has interesting things to say, and you can take a couple hours to get every interesting thing a person has to say, and then all you have to do as the host is just spit out whatever 7 fucking stupid topics you're always trying to talk about, and otherwise let your guest do all the work of being interesting. So maybe I should get a guest, but I won't. Because one thing I did realize in this rethinking of what I'm doing is being entertaining or interesting is not the primary goal. That's something I forgot, I think, when I was trying and failing to be funny or interesting in previous episodes. But really, it's about getting it out there. It's about just having a voice more than anything. So this isn't about you. And a lot of content creators will tell you it's about you, and they're lying because it's about money or attention. And you know, from how I deliberately sabotage any marketability I could possibly have, that I have no reason to lie to you. I'm still retarded though. By the way, niggers. But the number one thing then is the voice, and that's something I think about. Sometimes I wonder if it's better to have a voice and nothing to say, or something to say and no voice. And you'd think the answer is obvious, but sometimes I think that if I really look deep into my soul, I find that if I had to choose between them, maybe I would choose to have something to say, no voice, because then you get to feel like a victim versus just feeling stupid and boring. I try not to brush too close to politics because it's boring and I'm stupid and it's talked to death about. Shut up. But I care a lot about culture, and culture is upstream, so there's bound to be some overlap. I'm sure you can guess how I feel about free speech and cancel culture and all that. As a chronic dissident and wrong thinker, there's a clear side I should be on for this. But it's interesting that I talk about voicelessness versus being boring as if I still have the choice, which means I do have a voice, which means cancel culture hasn't completely taken over and silenced me. I still worry about being cancelled, but I'm so unimportant that I can't imagine why anyone would actually come for me unless out of petty spite, which often motivates me, so it's still possible. Anyway, I said something in a previous episode about how everything is amazing and nobody's happy. And I'm not retracting that whole bit, but I do acknowledge that maybe I was wrong. In the short amount of time since I said that, I've read a piece of fiction that made me rethink it, and I get too much meaning from fiction. So I read a book called Past Master by R.A. Lafferty. And as a side note, I was looking online to see discussions of the themes in the book to see if my take on it was correct or retarded, and there isn't that much discussion, but I was reading some reviews on Goodreads and it's truly alarming to see how retarded some people are. Then again, maybe they're right and I'm the retards. But the book made me think that maybe my assertion was wrong, that it's invalid to find some reason to be so demoralized in the amazing now. And I don't have a specific quote or quotes from the book, I'm just gonna spoil a bunch of stuff. So if you don't want the book spoiled for you, then you should have read it before listening, idiot. So in the book, it's sci-fi. In the future, they've created utopia on another planet called Golden Astrobe. And it's a world where everyone is rich, everyone has luxury and comfort. It's utopia, it's everything we've been striving for. But they have a problem with people willingly choosing to leave utopia, to live in the slums, in horrible conditions, backbreaking work, literally being hunted by machines for threatening the golden dream, the Astrobian Dream. And that's if they don't simply kill themselves, using basically the equivalent of the suicide boots from Futurama. It's increasing numbers. More and more people are abandoning utopia, and they're trying to figure out why. And just for some additional context, this world has programmed persons, machine men, sentient AIs, and in civilized Astro, they're indistinguishable from humans. Although the people in the slums can tell them apart, they can tell that they lack something that makes them human. Which isn't a subtle metaphor, right? And I understand this is a very 14-year-old opinion, but sometimes it seems like they're machine men in real life. Like, try talking to a Wall Street guy, or a Silicon Valley guy, or anyone but me for a non-trivial amount of time, and see how that goes. See how it feels to talk to someone like that. And for categorizing people in the real world into these groups of people that exist in this novel, I don't think I'm a programmed person, but I don't think I'm a slum true human guy either. You know, the ones that get hunted down by machines. Dissidents. And while I am pretty dissident in my opinions and general schizoid ideas, I don't think I would give up luxury to be true to my ideals. I think I've already failed that test, and the stakes are much lower in the real world than in the sci-fi world. So I guess I'm just one of the civilized people, halfway to machine, can't tell the machines apart. When I talk to a Wall Street guy and I think is a machine, I'm just being autistic. And gay. Anyway, it's utopia, with every pleasure and every desire fulfilled, and robot waifus, and nobody looks up at mountains. I don't know why that one thing stuck out to me, but it did. So in the book, they're trying to figure out why people would leave such a utopia, and it reminds me of a quote from Will Durant, whom I've never heard of, and all I know about him is this quote that was told to me by an asshole over tacos. A nation is born stoic and dies Epicurean. So in both Astrobe and Earth now, we have one of the most decadent societies in history, and every pleasure, every desire, and you don't have to work that hard. The punishment for not working hard isn't starving to death, it's just the luxury of complaining that some people have more than you. And people actually listen. So I can list all the ways that life is amazing, and I'm not wrong, but there's still a sickness in our culture where people want to leave utopia, as close to utopia as we've gotten so far. So I was wrong to dismiss these attitudes so easily without really thinking about them until some book told me to think about them. Maybe I'm the retards. And in the book, the whole conflict comes to a head when they tried to ban religion, which was already almost dead on its own without any intervention from the government. That kind of brings me to something that was a previous call forward, which is the nature of belief and what it means to people. There's a line that Terry Pratchett uses multiple times. I don't have an exact count, but I know he said it a couple of times at least. And he says that man is where the rising ape meets the falling angel. This is the second time I've referenced Pratchett, and I'm going to reference him a lot because fuck you. I like him. Unironically, I think he's one of the greatest writers of all time. I did get that quote wrong though. Anyway, maybe all of us, myself definitely included, get so focused on the rising ape part that we forget about the angel altogether. And in light of that, you can think about my childish retarded ranting about how we're 10 parts animal to 1 part angel and that's not good enough, and how even after that lesson I have become the not good enough even more concretely. And the angel in me weeps. I'm not a religious person, and I often mock religion as I mock everything. But I do think that we're creatures of story. Everyone, if you dig deep enough, has a story, a narrative that is key to their identity and mission, and it guides them in life. And maybe you don't think you have one, but I'm sure you do. Even if you think you do know yours, maybe you don't. Because I have an idea of what mine is, and I'm not entirely sure that I'm right, and I'm positive that it's not a good one, and I need to dig it out of myself and replace it with something better, which I'm trying to do. But I did find a quote in another piece of fiction that seems to match up with what I think my core story is, even if it's one I'm not entirely happy with and trying to change. With questionable amounts of effort, because it is, as Aurelius would lecture to me, a very seductive story. Anyway, it's from The Poisonwood Bible by Barbara Kingsolver. My habit is to drag myself imperiously through a world that owes me unpayable debts. I have long relied on the comforts of martyrdom. And that's from one of the characters, Ada, who's half crippled and has this very dark, bitter perspective on the world. Truly a retard GF. Pretty fucked up that I identify with her, huh? Especially because I'm not crippled. I'm not even underprivileged. I'm very privileged. Isn't it crazy? When you've been wronged, everything you do becomes right. But everyone has their story, their narrative. You can try to change it, but I don't think you can get rid of it. I think it's just the way our minds work. It's just who we are as a species, having this core story, this core narrative, this set of beliefs is what makes us human. Because if not that, then we would just be the rising ape alone. And if the rising ape doesn't actually meet anything in its upward trajectory, then what are we but elevated apes? And I know there are a lot of people who hate religion, and they say religion has caused only harm in the world. It's the most destructive thing that's ever existed, and the world would be a better place if we didn't have religion. But if we didn't have organized religion, it would be something else equally powerful. You call it by a different name, it would have a different skin, but it would be the same thing. It would be just this core part of who we are. And we would do the same horrible things and the same beautiful things in the name of it. And whatever it is, even in this hypothetical world where we didn't have Christianity, Islam, Judaism, veganism, there would be something else by a different name, by a different skin, and it would be moving nations. So you can be like me, not religious and laughing at the old man in the sky telling you not to masturbate, but understand that we are apes dangled with ornaments, thinking we've overcome humanity when we've just missed the angel by a mile. But religion is fading today. I'm not going to look that up and get actual statistics and facts, but I'm confident I'm right. Story of my life, right? Anyway, religion is dying, but we're not magically free of these oppressive chains of belief. The old gods aren't even dead. They just become demons as new ones spring up out of the ether. Right? Wasn't the devil kind of based on Pan or Pan? You know, that goat fuck god. Literally. And as the old gods become the demons, as we start hating on the vestiges of these large organized religions, you have to wonder, are these new gods invention of the machine then? There's a book by Neil Gaiman, American Gods, another piece of fiction. This one was actually a pretty important part of my youth. I read my copy so many times that it actually split in half along the spine. And I'm not going to spoil the whole story, but there's a quote that I kind of found at random that does seem to at least cover this idea. There are new gods in America, clinging to growing knots of belief, gods of credit card and freeway, of internet and telephone, of radio and hospital and television, gods of plastic and beeper and of neon. As religion dies, we don't just become the next stage of man, we just fill the void with new gods. I understand how it sounds as I talk about this, because it's like that girl you knew in high school who posts on social media about how bad social media is and pats herself on the back for being so smart and figuring it out. Because I understand that if there's worship of technology and internet, that I am one of the acolytes. I am way up there in the hierarchy of the religion of the internet. And it's scary that I even have to clarify, I don't mean that as a boast. I've met people who do brag about having the best means. That's a scary thing. It's not good that I have spent so much of my life devoted to computers and the internet. I do have the best memes though. But it's not just worship of technology. People are just looking for any new gods. Usually people jump into conspiracy theories because it's a story and a narrative that explains the world and unites you with a group of people. And I know because I love conspiracy theories for all the wrong reasons. For better or worse, these dominant organized religions unified people under a common narrative. And now with this void, people are desperate for a story, especially one that gives them a group or a community or a tribe. And maybe that's why nobody's happy. Maybe we've lost our story. And I bet a lot of the people who are unhappy would fucking hate for that to be the reason. It even bugs me a little. Even as I accept that belief is a core part of being a human, I don't subscribe to any one religion. If pressed, I would describe myself as agnostic, and if really pressed to actually have an opinion, I would say I'm an atheist. But I see the value of it, and sometimes I wish I could believe. Sometimes I wish just wanting to believe was enough to make me, you know? Because that works for a lot of things. I believe a lot of dumb shit, but for some reason this particular topic I find myself resistant. And this actually kind of relates to when I was talking about sanity as consensus. Because if we all agree upon a set of lies and call that sanity, then someone who doesn't believe those lies and is more in line with reality, and we call them insane, it's not just insanity, it's less human. Right? So consider the following. Suicide. But actually consider all these common narratives that unify people seem to go up to some level of scale, and then beyond that it's incredibly divisive. It becomes my story versus yours, tribalism. It's always coming down to tribalism. And one prevalent example today is the political narratives, because to a lot of people it really does seem like it's a religion. You can see how when groups from one of the tribes, the two major tribes in the US, when people within those tribes are talking, they use all kinds of wording and attitudes to dehumanize the outgroup, to turn people who don't believe your story into unpeople, into non-humans, so that you can do inhumane things to them because they're evil and wrong and dangerous and just not people. So anyone who doesn't fit into this common narrative of your particular tribe is just not a person, even if that makes half your neighbors not people. And I think it's also important to remember that these narratives get co-opted to control people, to nudge forces towards some obscure Machiavellian end. There's always someone trying to gain from it, and this isn't something new. I'm sure every story can be co-opted, even down to the major religions whose void is opening up the space for all these new stories. So even back in the olden times, which I might sound like I'm glorifying as this perfect time of unity in narratives, which I'm not, but I kind of get how it sounds that way. People were still abusing stories and narratives and human nature to control people and get them to do what the evil, manipulative people want them to do. And these stories are so important to who we are and how we act and how we perceive the world that it's really like living in different realities. Because, again, going to the political tribes, I make a point of going into online communities of extremists on both sides. They say a lot of the same stuff, which doesn't seem compatible. Like both sides feel like they're oppressed and the other side is in power because everyone wants to be a victim, so that everything they do is justified. And they always attribute the exact same bad traits to each other. It's really weird to see, as someone who is not accepted by any tribe. You could say I see this with the clarity of an outsider, or you could say I'm too retarded to understand what's going on. And I wonder if this tribalism component and this unifying and dividing is required in the belief game. I suspect it is, based mostly on my own cynicism. But I'm a big dummy. Someone smarter might have come up with a way to create some great unifying story that doesn't rely on an outgroup and a common enemy and just unites people in some beautiful way. People like telling stories like that, but if you're so smart, how come your religion of peace has the spread across the world, beheading people and suicide bombing stuff? So maybe this is just how we work and how our beliefs work. With all this, I'm not trying to assign a value, good or bad, to the power that belief has within us and our communities. And I don't think anyone reasonably could. I think it just is how we work. And similarly, I'm not placing a value on religion or its fading or the new religions that replace it under new names. Even though in the world of Astrobe, I'm the person who stays in civilized Astrobe in all the luxury, but still sympathizes with the ferals and the slums who don't want to give up their beliefs and their religions. I think maybe it's just I strongly enough believe that belief is what makes us human, that it seems to me like we'd be shedding humanity to abandon it. And I'm scared to find out what we become next. And maybe the worry for me is that as these new religions come in to fill the void, they're smaller and more numerous and they splinter us. And maybe that's how the entire notion of belief dies, until it becomes a landscape of one religion per person. Which you would think I'd be into as someone who has trouble submitting to any one tribe and joining its ranks. Although even that I probably don't do to the extent that I think I do, because there's something romantic about standing apart and being an outsider, and I'm sure I don't live up to this badass picture I have in my head with my hair blowing in the wind. Anyway, maybe it really just comes down to the numbers, at least as far as why nobody's happy. Because it does seem like everyone's lonely, and that might imply that they have no community, and maybe common beliefs is how you build a community. So when Christ cucks are crying about how religion is dying, maybe in some indirect way they're right, but a more accurate description might be that religion is splintering and morphing into many micro-religions, and this is destroying our sense of community. Because everything's amazing, but nobody's happy. I'm going to be honest with you, I feel like I understand this topic less now that I've talked about it than I did before. Congrats on wasting your time.